Good evening, everyone. So, while I was watching the show 30 Days, um, a lot of the concepts popped up, but three that stood out were one, deprivation, two, imposition, and then three, the clash of realities. The reason I feel this way is because when they had first started, it wasn't too hard, but as things started to go on, with the first one, deprivation, they couldn't get everything that they needed, such as when I forgot his name, but he had a wrist injury, and when it turned out to be something worse, he tried to go to the free clinic, but he wasn't able to get in there. And just to go into the main hospital for a walk-in was extremely expensive, and everything else was. They weren't able to get a good house. The house that was in one of the worst neighborhoods. They had a break in, a crack house down below, and ants crawling all over, and so they couldn't get a good standard of living, which is what a lot of people who are in minimum wage, in fact, I grew up like that, and I'm sure a lot of people have. The second one, imposition, they were forced to move into that place because it was the only place they could afford, and even then they still just scraped by. They were forced to take jobs that weren't very good, that didn't pay a whole lot. They had to get up at early hours. They didn't have vehicles to move. They had to rely on the bus, and if the bus wasn't moving, they had to rely on the cab, which again took a little bit, or not even a little bit, a lot out of the money that they barely had. They were forced to do a lot of things that in their normal lives they wouldn't have to do. Third was the clash of realities. When things started getting tough, they saw how bad things could be for people who lived minimum wage. They could barely take care of their kids. They saw how big of a toll it was on people who were in relationships and why it led to people getting into alcoholism. And even though they knew that things like that existed, it took it to a whole different level when they actually had to experience it. And even though all the other where are they? Concepts were in there too. These three stuck out the hardest, and part of it was because it applied to them. But I think that these take a bigger toll on people who are living minimum wage than we'd like to consider. And growing up, I didn't realize that it was that big of a struggle for my mother, who was raising me on her own. And I can only imagine how hard it is nowadays for single parents, for people living minimum wage, for those who have mental, physical problems. Thank you. Have a good night.